approving this agenda?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I'm not sure what's going to have a pop.
It'll be manually put in.
That's fine, thank you. Okay. So there are a number of things that are sort of automatic on the board docs agenda. We have an executive session. We have no speakers. We should have minutes for December 7th and January 4th, but they're not posted to board docs, so we'll have to. Oh,
They should be up there.
Let me. I should be seeing it because I'm logged in. Let me log out and log back in again.
Which one are you trying to start with, the December 7th or January 4th?
I wasn't seeing either of them on my particular joint meeting. I don't see them as attachments.
Oh, it's not an attachment.
Oh, I'm sorry. There it is. Thank you. I was looking for it in the body of the. Sorry about that. Okay. I have in front of me the meeting minutes for December 7th. I'd like to entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion to approve by President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner Malloy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Carries 7-0, 6-0. Oh, is
No.
oh Commissioner Adams is not here, so it carries 6-0. Okay, we can move on then to the minutes of January 4th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a motion to accept by Commissioner Malloy and seconded by President
Second.
Elliott. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 6.
Voting is now open. You can vote for that.
Oh, is there electronic voting?
Yes.
I'll give the system time for the pop-up window. Everybody see the pop-up window?
I got kicked out, so.
Okay, I'm going to give everybody a little bit of time.
We're just waiting on Vice President LeBron and President Elliott.
Yeah, I got kicked out, so.
You're all set.
Okay. All right, ready to move on then. Under item 5A, it is my understanding that we do not have any municipal policy recommendations for this meeting. Item 5B, policy 2390, public board hearings, and its accompanying regulations. This was reviewed. Oh, I have a clean copy. Changes. Don't believe there was anything substantive. This is, the only changes recommended are formatting. And in this case, separating the regulation because for some reason when it was scanned into the website, the regulations were attached to the public hearing. Okay. Discussion on the topic of our public hearings.
I actually have one, if you will. If you look at the third paragraph, it says at the beginning of each hearing, the board may present information on the topic of the hearing. Speakers shall be required to give their name and address. We don't currently do that. Non-residents do not have the privilege of speaking at public hearings except when permission is granted by the chair. We've had several occasions, and I don't necessarily have a thought either way, but this has not happened with Fidelity. So if we're required to give address, then that lets us know that the person is a non-resident, and then they have to be given permission or privilege to speak. So I just wanted to point attention to that.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you are pointing that out. There's no reason we couldn't be gathering potential speaker's address when they sign up, except that it has not been part of our regular day in, day out protocols. So the question then before this body is, do we want to do it the way the policy is written, or do we want to do it the way we have as a matter of daily course? Please.
For me, I'd like for us to be as aligned with policies as we can. So we're either going to include the address so that we know that it is only city residents unless it's given permission by the chair. So for me, I always had an issue with us sort of being loose with our policies. And so if we're going to be loose with them, I think that the policy needs to address that. And so for me, if this is the policy that the board will vote on, then I think that we should be getting the addresses of non-residents, of everybody actually, so that we know.
Is that the consensus of the body, Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I just want to say I do believe our staff, though, for our public hearings, I can't speak to the superintendent's public hearings because they've been separate, but our staff does collect at least the email address and phone number. This doesn't specify whether it's a mailing address or an email address, so I do think it's a little bit of a gray area. And also we collect that so that in case something happens with a speaker, especially now with COVID, we have been collecting email addresses because most of them are coming through Zoom, so we do need to know what email they're going to be entering the Zoom room with, if you will. So yeah, I see like the last time this was even potentially touched or it was adopted in 1998, so I don't even know, I think AOL was probably just kicking off around that time, but I would just add, I'm personally, I'm okay with either way. If we can specify email address, I would be okay with that. I just want to touch point on the non-residents do not have the privilege of speaking at public hearings, except permission granted by the chair. As someone who chairs finance and does the public board hearings, I would never not allow someone to come in and speak and advocate in the public hearings about the things, because oftentimes, even though they're not city residents, they could live in the surrounding area and still be connected to city students one way or the other, whether it's through the district itself or other means of programming. So, but I'm okay with either way. We collect their address or we figure out a way. I do think if we say that non-residents have an order, that it would have to be in the bylaws, because our bylaws say students have a right to go first, staff. There's an order that's listed of who gets to speak first. So perhaps aligning that as well.
Thank you for that input. Let me add a little bit of clarity. The board bylaws cover all speakers at a regular business meeting, and that does not distinguish between resident and non-resident. So we have historically used the same set of rules for public hearings as for our business meetings, and it seems clear here we need to make a distinction, because at our business meeting, we allow staff to speak, and there's very, very high probability that they do not live in the city, but we're not discouraging it. We literally say if they're a staff member, they're entitled. So examples of public hearings would be our required contract for excellence hearing, our charter school public hearings. We do have a requirement for the for the budget, 2 public hearings. So those are examples of public hearings, and certainly we can call a public hearing for any other reason that might be appropriate. That's what this policy covers specifically. So let's give forth as an example the budget hearings. If we had, say, staff members who lived outside the city, who identified themselves as a staff member but also wanted to speak, we would simply call that to the attention of the chair, and it would be your prerogative as the chair of the finance committee, if the finance committee is overseeing that hearing, to make the determination. Does that make sense? So we will start applying this standard going forward unless I hear a preponderance of my colleagues say that's not the direction we want to go. Silence is consent.
I know,
We
that's
will
what it
leave
sounds like.
leave the language as it.
I know.
I missed something, what?
That's what it sounds like,
Yeah.
silence.
Yeah, so silence just means people have agreement.
Okay, all right. I'm glad we clarified that. So,
Oh, I do have one question about the, unless you
we're
clarify.
still on it, we're still on this.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that the address is the, maybe people's home address as opposed to an email address?
For the public hearings, and I just outlined that there's a distinction between our board meetings, our
Mhm.
monthly board meetings and a public hearing. We'll just ensure that staff collects not a full address, but a town of residence, so that we can at least determine whether they live in the city or in one of our surrounding suburbs. But you're correct, email is what we kind of need in the case of Zoom calls. So we'll do both. Okay? Any other thoughts? How about on the regulation portion? Are there any questions or concerns on the regulation portion? There are some language changes here. In our subcommittee work, we came to the conclusion that we ought to include, first of all, we're going to be changing this to an exhibit because it doesn't technically fall under the heading of superintendent regulations. And being an exhibit, we thought it would be important to include the district phone number that people would call into in order to register, and the email right in the exhibit document, which we might not do if it were likely to change often. Any thoughts about why those changes happen? Any cause for concern? Seeing none, can we take the two as a package? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
I have a motion from President Elliott and a second from Vice President LeBron. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, are we going to see it pop up?
Yes,
Okay.
it should be popping
There
up.
it is, okay.
It's not popping.
Just give it a little time.
Yeah.
It's a surprising long lag. All right, that takes us to the facilities policies. I think we have, okay, I thought we were going to see a PowerPoint. PowerPoint? Oh, we do.
Yeah, it should be attached to it.
I see a zip file. I do not see a PowerPoint.
Yes, they're under administrative
Oh,
content. I believe.
okay, yep, all right. Thank you so much. I'm not looking at the dot extensions to see that. All right, so, yes.
I'm getting feedback from the community that our mics they can't hear us like on the live. So I just want to bring it to your attention because they're saying you sound really far away. All of us do.
Yeah, part of it is the plastic is putting the microphone quite a ways away from me, but, okay. Charisma, would you like to talk us through the PowerPoint?
Yes, I can. We're working on popping up on the screen, but it is important that I can start talking. So this is our facilities policies, the 7,000 series. And just a reminder of the policy roadmap. So it came to subcommittee where the subcommittee met, and then it was submitted to our executive cabinet for feedback, and then it went out to the community for input. So for example, well in this case it didn't go to like parents and stuff because of the content, And then the subcommittee, reviewed it for one last time, and now it's here as policy Cal. The contributors to this series were the policy chairperson, so Commissioner Powell, the superintendent, general counsel, the chief of operations, and of course, the community liaison to the board. The committee met bi-weekly to review this series. We tracked the changes, where it was sent out to the various different individuals involved, and recommendations were reviewed by the subcommittee to present to you all today. And so now I'm going to talk about what changes were made. So for facilities goals development, policy 7000, the significant changes there was that the changes to goals to limit vagueness. There were no changes in terms of the NSBE recommendations. The lead safe schools policy 7010, there were no significant changes or no changes based on recommendations by NSBE. Community use of school 7050. The change there was the rename for clarity. In terms of the recommendations, policy is redundant to 1500 and the title may be misleading. The content leads itself to construction and planning, perhaps a title of planning of shared building use or the like. The significant change there, rename for alignment, change to who can petition and state notification. There were no changes based on recommendations from NSBE. And then finally, closure of school buildings, policy 7600. There were no significant changes to this policy. And then in terms of NSBE, this policy may be in need of updating. So next steps would be, after each commissioner gives recommendation, it would be to forward out of the committee to the full board at our next business meeting. Policies will follow the policy adoption process outlined in policy 2410, which means that there will be the 3 readings until the final vote to move forward with this policy to make revisions. And that would happen in April, the April business meeting. That is all.
Terrific. Thank you, Charisma. In the packet, you'll find that policy 7050 has been community use of schools, and in the clean copy, it's still titled that. But within that clean copy, Mike Schmidt is recommending a title of capital work policy, because that better describes what is covered in that policy. So there's not a lot being offered for change, but there are only 5. So let me go through it systematically and ask if there's anyone in particular we want to talk about. Are there any questions to policy 7000? My only recommendation from the policy committee standpoint was that the 1,000 level, like when it was the board section, it was the board goals and priorities. Superintendent section, it was a superintendent goals and priorities. My suggestion was that for the 7,000, that we add an exhibit that might capture the priorities that the facilities department uses when it's working through the various upgrades that we're trying to make to our facilities, whether it's FMP or whatever, what used to be described as the ideal schools, or so that when we're doing upgrades to our schools, we're using an equity lens. But being an exhibit, it wouldn't be required for board approval, so I'm just putting that out there for your information. Is that was something I would like to see. Any other thoughts about facilities development goals, policy 7000? Okay. Let me do this all in one. Oh, do you have a question?
You have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned an equity lens. What did you mean by that?
Okay, so, and Mike's here to speak to it too. He's well-versed in our efforts towards equity, but we're really talking about, all of our facilities, their footprint is different. They may or may not have green space to offer. They may or may not have athletic fields, but in any event, we want them to be accessible. We want them to have space dedicated to special education needs. We want all of our schools, if possible, to have gymnasiums of equal quality, as opposed to, a cafetorium type situation. Mike, do you want to speak more specifically to what sorts of things we have on our ideal schools list? I think your mic is dead. Hold on. Let's let the.
Good evening, President Elliott, Vice President LeBron. In terms of I think the schools renovated in phase 2 are really kind of a great example of this. So one example is community access. So with those schools, we kind of separated the cafeteria as much as possible, the library, the gymnasium, so that people can have meetings and events, practices and so forth, and not open the entire building. We also try to have equitable spaces, and I think that's where the equity report comes in, that as much as possible, School 7 will mirror School 54, will mirror School 10,
Okay.
and so forth. And it's not equal by any means, because obviously the facilities drive different expenditures, but that's really where that equity and that core model program language comes from. We may choose a different lens with phase 3, but that's how phase 2 was put in place.
It's answered. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Super. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to try to run through all of them and then have one vote. How's that sound? The next policy, Lead Safe Schools, 7010. Any questions or concerns about that policy? President Elliott, your mic is on. Do you intend to ask a question?
No.
Okay. How about you, Commissioner Patterson? No? Okay. Hearing no questions on 710, let's move on to 7050. Again, we'd like to change the name to Capital Work Policy, but other than that, there's no change proposed. Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, thank you. I actually, I don't have any issues with the proposed changes, except I do not like the capital work title as a policy for it. And I think it's too generic for anyone in the community to look at it and then try to figure out what is meant here by capital. I thought there was a suggestion in the PowerPoint, I'm gonna pull it up, in the presentation that also suggested a different name. The content is so maybe planning of shared building use. I thought that was a little bit more direct as a title than what is being currently proposed. And that's just my feedback. I just want us to be mindful about how we label things, and that folks are not always going to be able to look back to this meeting to determine what we meant by that and how it's linked to the policy itself. And I do like what's in the PowerPoint. I think that was directly to this policy too, but I do like that title better than capital work policy. That's all.
What if it were to read something like capital planning for shared building use?
I would support that. I think it makes, I just want, again, us all to be mindful that as people are looking at these policies and reading the title, that they can decipher and figure out what we're talking about.
Right. Commissioner Elliott?
Yeah, because I actually thought when I saw the term community use of schools prior to reading it, that this had to do with community agencies being permitted to using the facilities. Is what I originally thought it was. And so if we're going to be eliminating the title of community use of schools, that probably for this particular policy, it may be a appropriate title to have a capital policy work. However, what about the policy for community partners agencies that may want to use our facilities? Does that, I didn't see that necessarily was addressed in the body of the policy.
Right. You'll see that there is a policy 1500.
Okay.
Public use of school facilities.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay.
Okay. So, and that's why NISBA did make a suggestion. If you actually look at the language.
You said 1500, Commissioner?
1500, public use of school facilities.
Okay.
But if you look at 7050, you'll see that the language in it is very specific to the capital works, as in our getting approval from city council for bonding and all and that sort of thing. So that's why the idea of using capital works or Commissioner LeBron, what did we just describe as a
Shared
possible
resources or something to that?
For the title, you said capital.
Planning for shared building use?
Yes. Let me just pull up the present. I think you added capital to what was in the presentation. Capital plan of shared building use or
Capital planning for shared building use.
Yes.
So I think Charisma's got that captured. If there are no objections to that being the title.
Let me just, can we ask Director of Operations or the Superintendent if there are any issues with that title that Commissioner LeBron is proposing?
I'm going to ask Mike to come up for that.
Okay.
He's coming up. So Mike, the question is, we're looking at the NISBA proposed title change. NISBA was proposing planning of
Yes.
shared building use as opposed to your proposal of capital work policy, and I'm offering up a hybrid, which would be capital planning for shared building use.
I'm certainly very comfortable with that if that's what the board's wishes are.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion about this section, this policy? Okay. Let me close that one down, and that brings us to the naming facilities.
Thank you.
All right. Oops, hold on. I have to open the zip file again.
Yeah, me too.
Now, this policy isn't actually that old compared to the others. It was amended in 2010, and I remember very distinctly that it was Commissioner White, it was then Commissioner, back when Malik Evans was our board president, recommended some changes to that policy. And I do see that there's a minor change.
From school community members to Rochester City residents?
Right. Okay. Any other thoughts on this policy? Commissioner LeBron?
Yeah, I do appreciate just the distinction too, just like, again, sometimes we do have individuals that live and reside in the city and want to support, our school community, but are not technically part of that school community, but maybe had a legacy there. And the only minor change I would add is that the request for name change shall be supported by at least 100 community members, that also be Rochester City residents. Because I just don't want to see a petition with people who are supporting from outside of the community. They may just be supporting because, somebody that they know posted it, but they don't live here. And I'm just saying that we should be very clear that it should be at least 100 Rochester City residents.
Right, I see that The first sentence, it changes community members to Rochester City residents, but the but the second sentence continues to read community members.
Right, which is vague.
So, but it is in the same block. We should probably be consistent. Is that what your comment was, Commissioner Malloy?
Yeah, I just wanted to
Correct.
agree. Yeah.
Okay, so for consistency's sake, we'll make that change, Charisma?
Yeah, because I don't think you want to have any confusion.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Any other thoughts on this policy?
Just one more, I'm sorry. There's a comment here in the track changes one in blue around naming facilities or naming of school facilities, and what the title of this should be. Was there a final recommendation for the name for this policy?
Well, I think it was thought that of schools was redundant, but, I mean, we only have a couple other buildings that are not actual schools. One's Hudson Street, which I suppose we could name, and one is Central Office, which I suppose we could name. But, so the idea is to be more inclusive, actually. All right?
Naming facilities then would be the title change.
That would be all inclusive.
That's it,
yeah.
okay. Thank you, I would support that.
Okay. All right, any other comments on this one? Seeing none, we'll go to the very last one then. The closure of school buildings, 7,600. This one really is new. This was the product of the round of closures that was recommended by Superintendent Vargas, and which didn't go very well, and we realized that we needed to have some tighter rules about how we, as a board, contemplated school closures. So there are a few, very minor changes being proposed. Yes, Commissioner Malloy.
Perhaps this wouldn't go here, but I'm wondering, is there any way that we could somehow put the word equity in this document? So like the plan shall include the following elements. Should we also be considering equitable distribution of resources district-wide to ensure that students are having similar experiences or access? I don't know if that's too specific.
I hear where you're coming from. Does everyone else feel that we should have something that encapsulates the idea of equity among our list?
I would support it explicitly being written in.
Okay, so what I'd like to do then, rather than try to wordsmith something as important as that from the dais, that we bring that back to you at our next committee, okay? Is everybody okay with that? Okay, great. But thank you for drawing our attention to that. Okay, so what we'll do then is, and that was the last one. So what we'll do is, I would like to entertain a motion to advance the first four.
So moved.
Seconded?
Okay, do you want to revise the motion, Charisma, to include just the first four?
I'll do it manually. But who motioned it? I'm sorry, was it President
Commissioner
Elliott?
Elliott?
Thank you.
And followed by Commissioner Malloy, right?
Yeah, so I'll just do it manually once everyone,
Okay, in terms of dropping off 7,600, okay? All right. All in favor of advancing the first four to the full board to be considered in our three reading process?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes 6-0. Okay. Just double checking my agenda. I believe that completes today's policy committee meeting.
Is that a new record?
Well, it might be a record for policy, which often is, can be hard to get through. But our next policy committee meeting, Charisma, do you have the date?
Yes, so our next policy meeting will be March the 1st.
Okay. I'm just putting that out there for the general public, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the policy committee
So
meeting.
moved.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Elliott, President Elliott, seconded by Commissioner Malloy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. I believe that means we turn the gavel over to the chair of the, is it Community, Commissioner Elliott.
Good evening, everyone. I am chairing the Community and Intergovernmental Relations Committee of the Whole on behalf of Commissioner Adams, who is not with us this evening. And so I'm going to ask for, I heard Commissioner Powell say it, just a approval for the agenda for this evening.
So moved.
Motion. Oh,
Second.
second. Oh, with two ever.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
I see that we have no speakers for the agenda, and we do have minutes, so I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes of the November 2nd Community and Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting.
Motion.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Gets approved 6-0. Let me go back to, so the next item on the agenda under discussion topics is the legislative breakfast updates, and there are no updates per se, unless I'm missing something. No updates.
I can talk
you
on
got
that.
it. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep, no problem. So just, we just wanted to make sure that all the commissioners were on the same page as to where Commissioner Adams were right now with the legislative breakfast. So the theme, of course, is still SEL. We have been able to, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, can you just spell out SEL for our listening audience? They may not understand the acronym. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. So SEL is social emotional learning. So that's the theme that have been approved. And so we have been able to RSVP our keynote speaker, which we are excited for. It will be Regent Ruth Turner. And then we have also been able to do something different this year as well. Our student, Isaiah, he will be our bright spot for students, but it's gonna be a little different because he has a little flavor at SEL that he'll be bringing based on a project that he did. And then we have been able to send out our save the dates officially to all the attendees. And within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we will be able to send out the official invitation for everyone to RSVP, as well as our priorities that hopefully once approved tonight, we'll be able to forward that over with the RSVPs as well. So that's where we're at. Let me know if there are any questions.
Thank you, Charisma. And so the next item is the legislative agenda, the 2022 legislative priorities. Well, let me just, do I need to take a motion on this first before there's discussion? All right, so any discussion on our legislative priorities?
Can we have the date again, please?
The date of the event? Yeah, March 5th.
Thank you.
So, it's Saturday, March 5th from 10 to 11:30, and it will be virtually on Zoom.
Any questions? Okay, hearing no questions, can I get a motion to approve the 2022 legislative priorities for this year?
Second.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a question, is that the same as the legislative agenda?
It's not?
Because the legislative priorities is not here on board docs.
I-
Am I wrong?
No, I've got the
No, it's
legislative
I have
priorities.
the priorities.
Can you point me to the,
I'm sorry, the priorities is under the title abbreviated RCSD legislative agenda.
Got it?
and that's the legislative priorities. So there's this confusion with the title versus the actual document.
Oh, okay. That's kind of what I meant. I was looking at the,
Yeah.
what it said,
For the
legislative
agenda.
agenda,
Yeah.
but internally, it's our priorities. Got
Yes.
it. Thank you.
Commissioners, just a quick reminder to say no, ask for further discussion before you
Vote.
your final vote.
Yeah, we just voted.
So if-
Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I asked in the beginning, did I need a motion? And then I was going to do discussion. And so now what you're saying to me is that I need to.
I know we're moving pretty fast.
Okay.
And folks are doing very well.
All right.
Again,
So, okay, thank you,
ask
General
if you want
Counsel.
further discussion before you take.
All right, thank you, General Counsel. All right, so, so we got a, do we have a motion? And we got a second?
We had a motion. I just wanted to make sure to go back to Commissioner Powell because she asked, are we all set with that reading of the agenda?
Yep, I see it. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
All right, okay, so we got a motion, we got a second? Somebody second it? All right, any discussion? Any Commission, General Counsel, any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of our 2022 legislative priorities, please, all in favor, excuse me.
Oh, you know, I did have I mentioned this at our last meeting.
Okay,
I apologize. We had the local aid priorities. I recall specifically, Vice President LeBron spoke about the maintenance of effort and the concept that that we should be lobbying our state legislators for to have the MOE, the change, the currently the maintenance of after is treated by the city as a ceiling, whereas the state intended it to be a floor. And because the floor and the ceiling are one and the same,
Right.
the way the city envisions it, I mentioned at our last meeting that I thought that these bullets belonged in the state portion, not in the local aid priorities portion. It shouldn't be treated as local aid priority unless we're asking our city to increase it. But if what we're asking for is a change in state law, it probably should be up in the funding priorities section.
any comment on what Commissioner Powers just said?
Yeah, I just want to add, like, I don't disagree with what Commissioner Powell is saying, because it does require the state legislators to enact the language change and even the percentage change versus the flat base. That would be a funding priority, because we're also asking them for the full funding on foundation aid, like, while we're there. And by the way, this also, please fix this for us too. And also even the Medicaid, eligibility piece of that too, that goes into this. So I would agree and support that. And then local aid priorities, we could still be asking locally from the city. Nothing prevents the city of Rochester from doing an immediate increase that doesn't require the New York State legislators to change the law or the language around that. And then an increased fiscal independence over money provided from the city. That one I don't know, and Commissioner Powell, maybe you can answer that, if that is a local, whether the city has the authority to do that, or if that's an ask that we also ask the state legislators to assist us with.
I appreciate you raising that question. I think that third bullet was added after I described what I hoped would be one of our priorities, which would be to enter into a fiscal independence agreement with the city. And that would not require state, so what's listed currently under local aid could be broken up, where the first major bullet and the two sub-bullets could be moved up into funding priorities. That third sub-bullet, it really would be entering into negotiations with the city. And as I think I forwarded copies of the white paper to several of you who haven't received it before. There are a wide number of things that we could be discussing with the city that have fiscal implications, including the way we borrow, including potential future distribution of the tax levy, that all of which could be negotiated, and not a single one of them needs to be sacrosanct, but if all 14 or so points could be, entertained to the extent that city council and the mayor are willing to entertain them.
So we have a motion on the floor to consider the legislative priorities as is, but it seems to me that we may need an amendment.
Well, I wasn't the one to make the motion, but I could offer up to those who did make the motion that we use the language that's here, but to divide it as previously described.
All right, so who made the motion?
I made the motion.
You made the previous motion?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So
Yeah,
do we
okay.
take that motion back, General Counsel, or how do we do that motion?
You can withdraw the motion.
So I'll withdraw the motion.
And enter into a new motion with the amendment.
All right, thank
So
you.
I'll re-motion, so I'll withdraw the motion and reintroduce the motion with the amendment of moving the bullet point legislative mandating annual increases tied to the school tax rate to move under funding priorities. And then Commissioner Powell, I guess just before I make this motion, let me just ask for clarity from Commissioner Powell.
two
The
bullets.
immediate increase and the increased fiscal independence, which doesn't require the state legislators, those can stay under local priorities.
Those
So
first two go under state.
No,
or you want to move and decrease fiscal independence up? Okay,
my suggestion was what is currently under local priorities, the major bullet point and the first two sub-bullets could move up to funding priorities.
okay, so that's the motion then I'm going to make.
And then that the third bullet would become a major bullet because it's all that's left in there.
Yeah, so.
Can I get a second?
So the motion is to move the two subset, the legislative mandating annual increases tied to the school tax rate and increase fiscal independence over money provided from the city or under funding priorities.
No, it is the
That's the
first
motion.
major bullet. The first major bullet and the first two sub-bullets would go under funding priorities. The last bullet will remain under local aid
Okay,
priorities.
so then that's the motion.
Yes. Can I get a
We
second?
know that.
I can tell by Charisma's smile that she totally knows what she has to do.
Okay, I'm like, yeah, that's
Was
the
there-
motion.
Who's second?
Commissioner Simmons.
All right. Any additional discussion? Any additional discussion? Having none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. And I think Charisma did the legislative announcements, and so I think that the only thing that we have
Oh,
left.
no, that's different. I did the updates. This one, this is just a reminder to all the commissioners.
About the
Do
March
you want to
5th.
read it, or do you want me to read it?
I don't know where I'm reading. Okay. All right, let me just get there. All right. So I thought you had did part of that when Commissioner Patterson asked you about the date of the, our session. But the Monroe County School Board Association Legislative Breakfast, that's going to be in person Saturday. And I think that that is at the Doubletree Hotel. If you commissioners can come, I'm going to be there. Superintendent will be there. So please, one of the things that had not been happening in the past is that we had not really been supportive, inclusive in the Monroe County School Board Association. So it would just be, I think, good for us to participate in that legislative breakfast and the other meetings that they have. The Big Five Lobby Day is going to be virtual. That's going to be March 1st, Tuesday, March 1st, and Wednesday, March 2nd. And as I said, it will be virtual. March 1st, beginning at 8:30, there will be an internal Big Five meeting to discuss budget priorities, coordinate discussion points, and review schedules. You must attend this if you are to participate in the Lobby Day meetings. Meetings are being scheduled throughout the day and should conclude by 5 p.m. And then Wednesday, March 2nd at 9:30, meetings are being scheduled throughout the day and should conclude by 1 p.m. And so I'm not going to be able to participate in this, maybe for an hour or so, both days. But if my colleagues can participate in that, you know, we need to show up and show out there to support, get our legislative agenda supported. Any questions about those updates, those announcements? All right, Commissioner Powell?
As we're moving on to the end of your agenda, I would just ask folks to complete the survey for the policy committee meeting that we just blew right past.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it was my fault.
Okay.
I should have closed out the meeting without
Okay.
asking.
All right, so let's do the survey. Charisma, if you could put that.
Keep in mind, there's 2 surveys, one
Oh.
for the policy committee.
So the one that's coming up now is CIGR.
Right, so if you could just take a moment and go back to the policy committee after you finish this one, I'd appreciate it.
We can conclude the meeting though, right?
We're going to do this first. Yeah, but I'll just,
Like, y'all can do that, we can still conclude it.
okay. So the policy one is going to come up, Charisma?
Or you have to go back into the
Gotta go
policy
back?
meeting.
Oh, Lord. Okay. What's that?
Remember how you said, I see that, I just seen your teams right now. You was at the teams meeting earlier,
Yeah.
but it was on Zoom, but I see your message now, because I was like, where are you?
We're about done.
Madam President, do we
Yes, ma'am.
have an executive session this evening?
No executive
No?
session.
Okay. Well, this is truly
Huh?
an amazing
It's all
feat.
good, let's enjoy it.
Just like, don't jinx it.
Don't jinx it.
You know, I did get some calls about the weather Thursday. I didn't realize it was getting a storm.
Oh,
Yeah.
We're monitoring, yeah.
Okay, because people are asking me if schools are closing. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
It starts Wednesday. I was talking to
Yeah.
President Elliott, Wednesday, all day, Thursday, Friday. Yeah, happy times.
I'm supposed to be doing some school visits on Thursday. I may have to cancel.
You
but-
may have to, yeah.
Oh, I think I did one wrong.
Looks like we'll be able to get home before the snow hits us, huh?
We have
Yep.
a motion.
So can I get a motion?
Seconded.
Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Seconded.
No. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night, everybody.
Good night.